Having seen what are the permitted and prohibited activities of a bank, now let us look at some of the principles of banking, which starts with the business of trust. Banks use not their own money. If you look at the bank balance sheet very carefully, the money of the bank, money owned by the bank, namely its capital, will be less than 10%. Even the most solvent banks, even with this latest Basel III ratio, the own capital of the bank will be less than 10% or around 10% possibly. Remaining 90% of the money comes from the public by way of deposit. Therefore, a banker is dealing mostly in other people's money, OPM. If you use it as, if you read it continuously, it is OPM. So you should not get inebriated with this OPM. If a banker starts getting inebriated with this OPM and starts lending or starts investing carelessly, he will be breaching the trust of the people. People have given him the money, given the deposit to the bank in the first place because they believed. It is a trust that has been imposed on a banker, and a banker shall never breach this trust. Banker should always remember that he is not dealing in his own money. Most of the money that he is dealing belongs to other people. So the banks have to follow certain basic principles in conducting its activities. Now let us look at what are the basic principles of banking. First is the principle of intermediation. Intermediation means a banker acts as a bridge between the depositors and the borrowers. Now for getting the money from the depositor, the bank incurs some expenditure by way of interest. It is called the cost of deposits, average cost of deposits for the bank. And the bank earns some income from its advances. It is the interest earned on advances. A bank should always look for interest spread. Interest spread means interest earned, average interest earned on advances plus investment minus cost of funds. This should always be positive. Suppose the average interest earned on advances and invest is 8% and cost of fund is 6%, interest spread is equal to 2%. On the other hand, if this is 6% and cost of fund is 8%, it will be negative spread. A banker shall never do business with a negative spread. A banker should always look at a positive spread. The interest spread should be positive, and not only positive, it should cover all his expenses and leave some portion of the interest spread as profit. Therefore, a banker should always look at a positive interest spread because he is an intermediary. The next principle is principle of liquidity. It is very important. A bank should always be liquid. If you don't have money, you go to the bank to draw the money. And suppose the bank says no money. What will happen? The bank's reputation in the market will go down. If a bank says no money to a customer, this may even result in run on a bank. A run on a bank is the worst nightmare of a banker. There was a bank called Palai Central Bank before independence. And this bank failed not because they were not solvent, but because they did not have enough money in their branches. They were not liquid. They were not having liquidity to give to the customers. This Palai Central Bank failed because customers came and asked for money. At that point of time, they were not having enough liquidity. They were not having enough cash to hand over to the customers. Customers thought the bank had gone bankrupt. So all of the customers joined together and came and asked for money. As a result, the bank had to be closed down. After closing down, Palai Central Bank repaid all the deposits 100%. All liabilities were fully extinguished. And afterwards there was some surplus left. That means the bank was solvent. What is the difference between solvency and liquidity? A bank is solvent if its assets are sufficient to pay its liabilities. Total assets are sufficient to pay its liabilities. Then a bank is solvent. In this case, Palai Central Bank was solvent because its total assets was more than sufficient to pay all its liabilities. Some surplus were also left after liquidation. What is the mistake they committed? They were not having enough liquidity at the branches when customers came and asked. Therefore, the bank shall never make the mistake of becoming illiquid even though solvent. Therefore, the second principle on which a banking should be done is the principle of liquidity. There should be sufficient liquid cash available at all the branches of the bank whenever and wherever the customers ask. The bank can never say, we have run out of cash. At no point of time we should say that. I very well remember when in my early days of my banking, when I was sitting in the counter, one cashier said, "No cash, sir." What he meant was whatever cash he had, that was all given to the customers, and he is not having enough cash. So he was shouting, "No cash, sir." Then there was a senior manager. He called him to the cabin and advised him, as a bank cashier, never in your life say no cash, sir. Because when you say no cash, the customers who are standing outside, they will think the bank has no cash. It will initiate, yes, it will start a run on a bank. Therefore, liquidity is one of the most important principles on which a bank should be run, which means that you should have enough cash to meet all the demands of your customers in all the branches. Then the third principle is principle of profitability. A bank should always make profit. A bank should, it is not making profit a sin. It is making loss a sin. If a bank does not make profit, it will not be sustainable over a period of time. Many persons in India think public sector banks, they are belonging to the government and they will not fail. But this belief, this trust can be sustained only when the banks start making profit. If a bank starts continuously incurring losses, then there is no way that bank can be saved. So a bank should make profit, which should be one of the basic principles upon which all its operations are performed. Then the fourth principle is the principle of solvency. Just now I told you the difference between solvency and liquidity. Solvent means the total, suppose, I will tell you from the example of a person, then you will understand it better. I am a person, I have a house worth 5 crores, I have real estate investments worth 10 crores. But when I go to the bank, when I go to a restaurant, I have not carried my credit card or debit card, and I, along with my friends, we eat in the restaurant. At the end I have to pay the bill. I don't have cash. That means you are illiquid. You are not having liquidity. You may be solvent because you own 20 crores worth of property. That is solvency. Liquidity means at that point of time when you are spending, whether you are having sufficient cash to face that particular expenditure, that is liquidity. So a bank, for a banker, not only liquidity, he should also be solvent. Otherwise he will become insolvent. If suppose the total assets of the bank are not sufficient to pay the total liabilities of the bank, then the bank will be declared bankrupt. Therefore, always solvency is another basic principle upon which a bank should be run. Finally, a banker shall never forget this basic tenet that banking is a business of trust. Nearly 90% of the funds of the bank come from the public. And the public means who? The widows keep their money. A pensioner keeps their money. A miner keeps his money. So all these people have they have reposed a lot of confidence in the bank, and they have kept the money with the banker. The banker should always be remembering this and cautious about it. And he should think he is a trustee of the funds of the public, and that trust shall never be belied. If a banker loses the trust of the people, that will be the end of banking career for him. Therefore, these are the basic 5 principles upon which banking is to be done. One is principle of intermediation, second is principle of liquidity, third is principle of profitability, fourth is principle of solvency, and finally and most important is the principle of trust.